Welcome back. WW Fly Corvair. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick look at, well, probably not a quick look. Maybe you want to grab a coffee or a beer or something. But I'll give you a look at the insider's view of taking a road trip. Over the last 30 years, I've taken countless road trips, done laps around the United States, done hundreds of house calls. I can't even think of how many air shows I've done. All of that. But it never really gets old. What makes it fresh are the people. So let's take a look at what one of these road trips looks like. And I'll give you a couple of photographs and a few videos from it. And give you an insider's perspective on what this stuff is all about. Let's take a look at the first photo here. The first photo is my compadre, Ron the drummer. That's 5 a.m. at a gas station in Chattanooga. We are driving to the Zenith Homecoming 2019 there. Took that photograph. Ron's a little enthusiastic. He's a musician by nature. He is a night owl, so he's really good at the all-night driving shifts, which we were pulling off right there. That's the good old red 86 pickup truck with somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 miles on it, towing the trailer, full of stuff, headed to the Zenith open house. Next photo shows you when Ron's driving shift was ending there. We were in Tennessee somewhere, and you'll notice that he is pulling the trailer at a pretty good clip of speed for 7:17 in the morning. 80 is not normally what we travel. I think that was going down a slight hill, I hope. When we got to Zenith, this is the new mop manual, and I had actually not seen a mop manual yet. We edited it online, and my real good friends Dan and Tracy Sheridan and Terry Hand were instrumental in this getting there, but it was shipped directly from the printers to Zenith, and Joyce there at Zenith got them tucked away for me. We arrived, and there they were. I had not seen them yet, and it's sort of indicative of the type of thing where I'm very fortunate to have an awful lot of friends who assist me with stuff. And there they were, and they were a pretty big hit at Zenith and have been since then. And we have a separate video on mop manuals. Okay, in the picture, Zenith 750 Corvair pilot Dan Glaze. He is holding mop manual number 1. Ran into him in the diner in Mexico, Missouri. Dan Glaze, excellent human being. He is from Ohio. He's been to 15 Corvair colleges. He's not that slow a learner. He came back to help out with an awful lot of them. Great human being out there, again, flying his Corvair-powered 750. Here's a photo of the dinner that night at Zenith. Who we have is Super Dave Bally. If you've ever been to Oshkosh and hung out at my booth, you recognize Dave. Dave's uncle is the gentleman who built the Bally bomber, the 1/3 scale B-17. Ron the drummer sneaking in there. And right next to him is Larry Nelson. Larry Nelson does all of our oil analysis. Larry is from Arizona. He works for the U.S. government at Yuma Proving Grounds. He's an expert engineer on vehicle systems. But he also has a Corvair-powered Zenith 601 HDS that he does a lot of flying with. He was the first guy ever to fly a Stoll nose bowl, and we have video and information on that also. Next photograph, something kind of fun. There's Ron the drummer right there, and he's there with Charlie Becker, who is the head of all things home building for EAA. He's giving Charlie a refresher course on metal signs. Music is everything in Ron's life, except for flying, of course. And Charlie is just getting a tune-up on, a life as a metal god. Okay, Val and Craig Westhead and Mark Bannon, 3 people who came in Corvair-powered Zeniths. It was an interesting photo. I just shot it for a moment at dinner, and it was kind of interesting because the next day Craig and Val won the award for Best Low-Wing Zenith, and Mark won the award for Best High-Wing Zenith present at the homecoming. Here's a photo of unexpected good times out there. That's Jim Waters. Jim Waters has been around Corvairs for a lot of years. He's actually from Philadelphia and was just riding westward on his way across country on his Harley-Davidson. Swings into Zenith, and we have a couple of minutes there. He's shown up all over the map. At Oshkosh many years, been down at my place in Florida. Excellent human being. He's got a Zenith 601 XL that's about 90% done. So, Jim, if you're watching this, get back to work on your airplane. Okay, next photo is Cam Rowe. Cam Rowe is actually a Canadian guy, but he lives in Salt Lake City and he works in Detroit. And that guy travels a lot. In the back of his truck, which he was camping in, he also had his Zenith 750 power plant right there for his future bird. And he brought it so that we could possibly give it a test run after the Zenith open house. And there are a couple photos coming up on that.
Awesome!
Let's take a look at the next picture. Right here, Pete and Pole Builder is Peter Jones in the black shirt, and he's there with his son. Even though he's a Pete and Pole Builder, he's come to the Zenith event because the Heinz family welcomes everybody, all home builders, to their open houses. Peter built a 3.3-liter Corvair engine, a box motor, at a previous college for his Pete and Pole project. Peter's going to be a little embarrassed and maybe ticked off at me for saying this, but I got to tell you something. A couple of years ago at a Corvair college, we had a guy who had a very serious medical emergency, and we did not have, it turned out when we had him at the hospital, he had a serious medical emergency and was short of resources to get back home. And without question, Peter kicked off a GoFundMe account and got that launched for this gentleman. Guy he'd never met before. Peter just set the pace in that. So when you've been doing this stuff for years, the biggest part of the reward is the people you get to meet. And when you're in a little bit of a crisis there and sort of a little overwhelmed, and a guy shows up and says, no, let me get this started. You remember that sort of stuff. He's an excellent human being, and I'm very proud to call him a friend of mine. Right here, next guy in the photo is Dan Noble. That smile says good times there. He brought a ton of Corvair parts to Zenith, and he just got launched on this stuff, and he's really excited to get going and everything. Very enthusiastic, and it's always fun to have new guys show up with that level of good feelings. Next photo, Bob and Carol Heiser from Texas. They have a flying Corvair-powered Zenith cruiser. They've been flying it for a couple of years. You know, they had a couple of issues with it and gave them a little bit of trouble. Bob and Carol picked up their engine secondhand from another builder who was quitting, and it took a while to figure out what it was that guy had goofed up a little bit in the engine. Didn't make the engine quit, but they had some instrumentation issues with it, but they got it all squared away now. So hats off to Bob and Carol, who stuck to the knitting and worked their way through that stuff. Really excellent people, been around, been to a couple of Corvair colleges, very nice Americans. Here's another photo of Mark Bannon, who has that Zenith 750. He just flew this to Oshkosh this year. That was his first year flying in. He flew into a 500-foot-long paragliding strip, picked up his dad, and then flew to Oshkosh when it was all muddy and they had a restriction against any airplane except ones with Tundra tires. He gladly flew in and had the time of his life. He is, you take a look at him, he's a veterinarian by trade. Very fun guy. I try and, tell my somewhat eccentric Oshkosh inner crew that, we want to meet new people and everything. He is the first guy who showed up and made my Oshkosh crew seem a little tame. He's really, really good fun, and it was a real pleasure meeting him this year at Oshkosh and getting to hang out a bit. Next photo, up on the wall is an interesting picture. This is from the 1 Week Wonder build. This is a huge wall-sized poster, and if you're watching this video, it's edited by Ken Pavlou. Ken Pavlou is the guy with the tool in his hand in that photo, the 1 Week Wonder. Ken is a 700-hour Zenith Corvair 601 XL pilot. The guy in the photo with him is, of course, Steve Oplander, who is a regular Zenith guy who works at the factory. Great guy that we're, always happy to see at the big events. But that's right on the wall in the main hangar at Zenith. Here's an interesting photo that came up. While we're standing in the parking lot, Charlie Becker from EAA is there, and he's got a collection of sport aviations in the trunk of his car that he's going to go donate to his old EAA chapter. These sport aviations were actually the property of Paul Poborezny himself. And we look at it, and we're flipping through the pages, and right then and there, February 1961, that photograph is of Bernard Pietenpol, and that is the first Corvair-powered aircraft in history. Right there was a J-3 Cub that they took out and went flying, and it was the first notes on how well it worked. And that's all the way back in 1960. Here's a photograph that was really important to me. That's Charlie there, and I shot this over his shoulder. And that's a look at all the bound volumes of sport aviation that he was donating to his original EAA chapter, where he has come all the way from St. Louis up through his years in aviation to a long time employee at EAA headquarters. An outstanding guy to know. And he is the reason why I have a lot of faith in the EAA as our representative as home builders right there. Those books that you see in the trunk, they actually belong to Paul Poborezny. Paul Poborezny, I met him a couple of times, exchanged a lot of letters with him, wrote some stuff for him. But if you want to know somebody who really knew him really well, you go meet Charlie Becker. Charlie Becker spent an awful lot of time, and for my 2 cents, Charlie Becker is the spirit of Paul Poborezny and the style of Paul Poborezny. So, great guy to know. Make sure you get a chance to meet him at some point. Right here, next photograph is Mark Bannon's airplane. A couple of people standing around, my trailer, and the Zenith main hangar in the background there. Just an easygoing afternoon. If you're ever thinking about going to a Zenith homecoming, make a plan to. I love Oshkosh, but Oshkosh can be a little bit of a madhouse. And this is a very, very relaxed setting that I enjoy. Been to about 15 open houses, planning on going every year. So make your own plans also. Next photograph was, even though we were not holding an actual wrenching Corvair College, wherever I go, people show up with Corvair motors, and we do a little bit of work and do a lot of inspections. So if you're ever coming to the same spot where I am, and you're wondering if you bring your core, you bring your core, because parking lot tours are part of the way that we do this stuff. So this is just a spontaneous explosion of guys out on the ramp after the Zenith homecoming was done. This is Saturday afternoon. Next photograph is Val's plane. That's Zenith 650 with a 2700cc Corvair in it. It comes to the homecoming pretty much every year. It's been an award winner several times there. Craig and Val, excellent people from Oklahoma, but really a very, very neat airplane. There's a quick look at Val's prop card right there, and you can take a look at some of the data that she has on there. This next video is a little clip of Mark Bannon's airplane flying back home to Wisconsin. After he came down, had a good time, then took off and went home on Saturday afternoon with just enough daylight and a little bit of reserve to make it home. It was a pleasure having him. This is what went on Saturday night after the crowd sort of died down. Zenith has an after-hours gathering of their crew and a couple of the commercial guys who work the event. But that's Steve Oplander, and that is Ron the drummer and Super Dave there. And what we're doing is we're getting Cam Rowe's engine up on the stand so we can give it a run the next morning. It was, like I say, even though it was a busy event, we met a lot of people and talked to a lot of people. The neat thing was that there were a bunch of the Zenith crew and some other friends who hung out real late. And we got a chance to do stuff on a relaxed, quiet evening. Right there, same engine a couple minutes later. The guy manning the drill to prime the oil pump, that is Cam Rowe right there, and getting ready for the following morning's test run. He did an excellent job setting the engine up. Okay, next photo. There's Cam's engine actually running. In the background, you can see the Zenith factory. That laid down a really sweet test run. Worked out perfectly, popped over. The first instant ran great. You can't say enough good things about it. There's a little bit of a close-up of it operating there. Big smile on his face. Here's a videotape. Give you a glance at a slower portion of the run. Break-in run to take care of the cam takes about 25 minutes. And then we vary the RPM a little bit. Most of it's run about 1,800 to 2,200 RPM. But this give you a look at the engine running a little bit on the slower side. Next photograph is Ron the drummer and I back in the truck headed out. We are not headed home there. Next stop was to go visit builders, which is something I've always done over the years. There's a photograph here, and that's just Ron driving the old pickup truck inside. And on our way to Randy Royce in western Missouri. Here's a quick video so you can understand how much drumming is part of Ron's life. If it's playing on the radio and he's driving and he doesn't need both hands, he's drumming away, and I think that's him cranking along to Warrant singing Uncle Tom's Cabin. Okay, next stop was Randy Royce. Always, when I go to a builder's house and we're invited in, you check out the bookshelf. And it's really nice when you see somebody's got one hell of a collection of aviation books, particularly World War I stuff. Really a lot of good books in that collection right there. So, yeah, that was a nice prelude. Here's Randy Roy's front yard in a reasonably suburban setting. That's his SE5A right there. That's the fuselage, but it already has done wings, and the engine has been mounted up on the front. This is a very, very complete plane, even though you're just looking at the fuselage there. That's his engine on my test stand and the trailer and the pickup truck out in his front yard. So he has very understanding neighbors, and we have a pretty fun video of what we got just after we shut the engine off after dark. But good time, and Ron and I stayed over at his place and appreciate his hospitality very, very much. Next stop, on to Nebraska. So really continuing in the opposite direction of home. This is a really cool downtown in Auburn, Nebraska. That corner of Nebraska really got nailed by the floods, and we had to do about a 75-mile detour to get over to Auburn, but well worth it because we are on our way to the home of the nicest people you have ever met in aviation. Enter Edie and Harold Beckford. If you have been around experimental aviation a little bit and were around the 1 Week Wonder or a lot of the stuff going on around Oshkosh every year, you have met Harold and Edie Beckford. These are quiet people who do not sing their own praises. They are humble and genuinely modest. But I got to tell you, if something good is going on in aviation and it has a crew of people supporting it, you got a really, really good chance that Edie and Harold are behind it. These are, they won't like me saying it, but they are the nicest people you have ever dreamed of meeting. The airplane behind them is a really interesting story. It was originally started by Roger White, and he has an EAA number of 42. My EAA number is 331351. So 300,000 digits separate me from Roger. Roger joined the EAA the first week it was in existence. Roger was a notable builder of many airplanes. He's still with us. But he decided to pass his last project, the MFI-9, on to Harold and Edie. There was a note about this on my website, and a lot of people were hinting at lowballing Roger on this. And I forewarned people that I have the memory of an elephant, and if anybody ever thought of taking advantage of a guy like Roger, I would never grow tired of telling people the story of who they were. On the other hand, I also promised that I would help out anybody who went on to pick up the airplane at a fair price from Roger. Enter Harold and Edie right behind the scenes. Go down and meet Roger and his wife, and promptly pay him 2 times what he was asking for the project. Harold and Edie, they are genuinely wonderful, warm people. If you don't know what an MFI-9 is, this is an actual Biafra baby. So this one is Corvair powered. The originals were O200. And one of the most interesting stories in aviation is the story of these being used as attack aircraft in the Biafran War of Independence. Yes, you're looking at that. That's a MiG killer. Just to show you why it's worth driving to Harold and Edie's, that's the driveway up to their house at sunset. Really unbelievably super pretty. Right there's the 1904 barn in the back of their house. Really interesting structure. You think about who stood in that barn and worked there before World War I. Just a very interesting piece of architecture. Kind of timeless. You travel around the country, you see stuff that changes every week in a lot of strip malls, and then you come across a really timeless place like this. It's really just great to see it. That's the window right there. That's I was just standing in front of the barn and noticed that the sunset was reflected in the window, and I took that photo there. It was just a lucky shot of a neat piece. Okay, while we're traveling around, here's a photograph. Photograph comes in on my cell phone. And we are not visiting this man, but just to show you that when we're traveling, stuff goes on anyway, and we still talk to people. This is Dale Bogart's Kit Fox. This has a 2700cc Corvair in it. It is a Kit Fox Model 7. He has been working on it for 6 years, and talked to him on and off, and he kept plunking away at it. That's way, way up near Canada in really northern Wisconsin. But he sends this photograph in while we're out on the road, and it's kind of inspirational that when you're visiting people, other people are getting this close to flying. There's the next photograph right there. That's an underside look at his cowling. His cowling's actually built out of one of my nose bowls, but it's blended into a rear section that he also made out of fiberglass. Really, really sharp-looking airplane. Okay, on to the next stop. Leaving Nebraska and heading into Iowa. This was my second visit right here. And this visit is to Craig Owens. Craig Owens built this airplane right here, which is a 2850cc Bearhawk LSA. It's an excellent design by Bob Barrows. We do make motor mounts, intake manifolds, and exhaust systems for this baby. And I made all the ones on Craig's, and he built all the rest of the airplane. That's a plans-built airplane right there. It has about 220 flight hours on it. The last time I passed through here in Craigstown, which is Audubon, Iowa, passed through here on my grand tour of the United States in 2016. It was the day after Craig got his airworthiness certificate. So, been flying it a lot of years. Started off as a student pilot when he got into this airplane. Now out enjoying himself, taking care of a lifelong ambition to build and fly his own airplane. Here's a shot at the instrument panel. Just a real simple steam gauge setup for a real simple airplane in a simple environment of flying and enjoying the airplane. Bearhawk LSA is an excellent flying airplane, and it is a real good match for a Corvair. I worked with Bob Barrows, the designer, on that, and it is a real good match. Again, while we're traveling around, things come in. We saw Alan Lansing at the Zenith open house, and when he got back home, he sent these pictures of his airplane. Still in Phase 1 testing, but there's another Zenith 650 with Corvair power and the handiwork of Alan Lansing, so pretty neat stuff. Next stop, some of you may actually recognize this building if you're from the Midwest. This is Blakesburg, Iowa, and that is the home of the Antique Aircraft Association. Antique Aircraft Association has been around as long as the EAA. It is a multi-generational project of the Taylor family. And when Ron and I drove there, I had not been to the museum at Blakesburg in 14 years. Although I hadn't been there in 14 years, and I hadn't seen Ben in a couple of years, we were greeted like family. This is really a very special place, and if you have not been there, you owe yourself a trip there. I've given an awful lot of thought to having a Midwest air tour, and when we were there, the Taylors extended a warm welcome to anybody who wanted to be Corvair-powered person visiting. It is aimed at antiques, but they are home builders at heart. These are people who work on airplanes, really know building and flying. So if you have a chance, plan a trip there. It's in southeastern. Blakesburg is down near Ottumwa, and down in the southeastern corner of the state. So next photo right there, just a little sample of stuff I was taking photographs of in their museum. That's the inside of a Stinson Detroiter. Really nice big bird that I've always liked. If you've been around for a while, you might recognize a special home built. That's a Boonsall Prospector. I think that might have been the prototype right there. It's in their museum. There's a view of a lot of different stuff, sort of an eclectic mix of light aviation. There are some experimentals in there, some really neat stuff. Ritz Standard hanging from the ceiling. That's the only one I've ever seen in person. A lot of other gliders and sailplanes, just neat stuff. So take a look at that. How many people know this engine right here? Probably never seen one before. That is the APU, the auxiliary power unit from a B-29. That is a Lawrence radial right there. It is the cutest little thing you have ever seen in your entire life. Back in the tail of B-29, when they needed auxiliary power, it was provided by this little critter right here. Makes you want to take it home and put it under your pillow. It's might be 24 inches in diameter. It's a real neat looking little motor. If you're a Corvair guy, you probably are a motorhead. You like looking at all sorts of stuff. The Antique Aircraft Association has an unbelievably good collection of motors. Right here's a photograph of a V12 Ranger they had on display. What I want you to see is this is one bank of 6 cylinders. Take a look at that intake manifold right there and see how it's got the 2 on one side and 1 on the other, and how the pipe comes in the middle. You recognize that as an inverted version of your Corvair intake manifold? So whenever I see somebody who says, I don't know why General Motors made the intake manifold and they didn't make it symmetrical, they didn't make it symmetrical because they knew what they were doing and they were real engineers, who understood fluid dynamics and internal combustion engines. So whenever you see engines divisible by 3 cylinders, you will frequently see an intake manifold that ends up like that. See how those 2 branch together with a Y pipe and they feed 6 cylinders? It's done this way over and over again with really well-engineered engines. You can see that on Allison V12s also, where they have 4 groups of 3 set up pretty much the same way. If you haven't seen one before and you have spent a lot of evenings looking at flying and glider manuals, that's actually a Lawrence Penguin engine right there. Kind of an interesting little 2-cylinder engine, never intended for flight. It has 1-pin crankshaft, so that baby shakes. But if you take a look at it, in the flying and glider manuals, there were actual plans for how you made a 2-throw crankshaft to fit in that case. That is when home building was really, really tough. So nobody building a Corvair is required to build their own crankshaft, fortunately, but just a real neat piece of aviation history. And it's not behind glass. You can walk up and actually touch the stuff. Admission is free, whatever your donation is. These are wonderful people. Out in their hangar, when they're working on airplanes, there's a Ryan STA, pre-war STA right there, and that is a legitimate Manasco engine. This is not a project airplane. This is undergoing an annual right now. This is a living, flying airplane right there. Just a magnificent creature that you can go up and study real close and see what real 1930s aviation was. Right there, it's a Pete and Pole fuselage sitting there upside down. Okay, you've seen plenty of Pete and Pole fuselages before. Get a good look at this one. It is an actual kit from Bernard Pete and Pole's shop in the 1930s. This was built into a flying airplane. The Taylors had it for a long time. It's undergoing a major overhaul at this point. But that was actually a Ford Model A powered original Bernard Pete and Pole kit. There's their slogan that they keep in letters 75 feet long on the side of the hangar. Next stop, drove into Illinois. Took a long trip in there. If you live in Peoria, you can tell your mayor he owes me an apology for the detour you have there. But we got caught up in a traffic jam in Peoria in the middle of the night with a 14-mile detour around a 1-mile gap in the road, towing a trailer. That was kind of exciting. But the really neat thing was we were going to go see Fred Thomas, and that's Fred Thomas's Zenith 750 Stoll right there. And they waited up, and we had a pretty good time. We got there at about 10:30 at night, went right to work, and we worked on that and did a inspection because he's coming up on his first flight. The airplane has recently passed its airworthiness since we saw it, passed it, and it's getting ready for its very first flight. It's got a 3-liter Corvair in it, and it is exceptionally well built. There's the man himself right there. Pretty good guy, very, very good craftsman. We did a 2-minute test on his airplane. We went over a bunch of details, but this is what house calls are all about. Getting a good look at what his craftsmanship was, and a moment to make sure that everything's going to go smoothly on his big day. That night, I think we were just exhausted from the trip. This was a photograph of the truck and the trailer. We drove about a mile down the road, found a motel, and camped out, and I think we stayed there till noontime the next day, till late checkout. Ron and I were having everything catch up with us. At this point, we've been on the road about 10 days. If you ever drive up I-39 between Bloomington and Rockford, there's a gate guard that I always stop and get a look at. There's some gas stations there, but it's an F-84F, real interesting Cold War airplane. Lonely old gate guard that is by a closed VFW post, but seriously a interesting airplane to get a good look at. Okay, next stop was Super Dave Bally's. Dave is a real important part of my crew. A really great guy. One of the people that you're just fortunate to know. This is a shot of the river right behind Dave's house in Dixon, Illinois. That's Ronald Reagan's hometown. Okay, there's a real interesting photograph. Dave was at Zenith. He's in the photograph of us helping out get a Cam Rose engine ready. That's me standing there with Dave and Ron kind of goofing around a little bit in the photograph. There's the same river next morning in front of Dave's place. But, what is the reward of doing Corvairs for years? You meet Dave Bally along the way. I don't even know how I met Dave. He used to just show up around Oshkosh, hang out a little bit, and very, very humble and quiet guy. Seriously, one of the most mechanically skilled and clever human beings I have ever met in my entire life. Just great guy, warmest of friends. If you have people that you love in aviation, I hope they're half as good to you as Dave is to me. He's a treasure in my life. So, we're heading out of his driveway, and to know what great mechanical toys he has, I got my truck stuck because it was raining cats and dogs, and truck is two-wheel drive with an open rear in it, and here comes Dave, takes out his grandfather's 1947 Deere 60 tractor, and effortlessly pulls the truck and the trailer out. Just a fun mechanical time. Next stop was my sister's place in Evanston, Illinois. Just had a quickie layover there to check in with my siblings. On the extreme left there is my sister Melissa, and this is a 1967 photograph of my family at the New Jersey shore, visiting there. I'm the little tiny tyke there in the background on the rocks. We're all smiling and everything, but this is 1967. That was the year Dad was in Vietnam for 14 months. Fast forward 48 years. Here's another picture from my sister's shelf. 48 years later, there we are together. If you ever think that there's anything okay about me, I will tell you that the two people sitting in the front of this picture are my parents. If there's a single stinking thing good that's good about me, it's a credit to my parents. I would never have been the person I was if I was not fortunate enough to be their son. And that's the four of us kids in the picture, my dad and my mom together. Mom and Dad were married for 67 years, and they dated for the 4 years that Dad was at the Naval Academy. So I come from a very, very rich family background. Okay, a little bit on the ride home. You can see there's a little trail of water underneath the truck. So we pull into a gas station, and we are down near Asheville, North Carolina, and the truck springs a hole in radiator heater hose. The heater hose running from intake manifold over to the radiator, 5/8 of an inch in diameter, springs a little leak right at the pumps. I don't know what other people do during this stuff, but I'm sort of a mechanical guy, and so is Ron. And all we do is we eat lunch while it's cooling off. We weren't clogging up the pumps too much. They had a lot of islands. And we just, went inside, ate lunch, let it cool off enough that I could open the radiator cap, take the pressure off of it, cut the hose down, tighten the clamp back up, put the tools away. Then we had no water to put in it. They didn't have a hose or anything like that, so we bought Evian bottled water, and some people at the pump next to us thought we were really weird because we were pouring bottled water into a 33-year-old pickup truck, but, just ignore people like that. But there is a certain self-independence to being mechanical. I don't like feeling dependent on, other people. They feel somewhat secure from having a AAA card. Me, I feel secure from having a little bit of knowledge, something easy enough to work on if I need to, and a little toolbox of tools. And that's just sort of how I approach life, and it makes me feel a little bit better. So, first night back, we came all the way back. It was about 3,300 miles on the trip. Came back and immediately went and picked up Phil Maxon, who is, that's me on one side right there, Phil Maxon, who's a real important part of the world of Corvairs. He's runs my Zenvair group, and his yellow 601XL spends a lot of the year down at my hangar in Florida. Just all around good guy, very important, known him for a long time, very, very rich friendship. Right next to Phil is Chris Welsh. Chris Welsh was my roommate at Embry-Riddle. I've known Chris 30 years. He works for Northrop Grumman over there in St. Augustine. And next slot over is Ron the drummer. We were just hanging out on a really quiet night without many people around St. Augustine. Just little pockets of people tucked away, having a real nice night. It was an interesting juxtaposition to being on the road. And next morning, there is Phil starting the annual by giving a bath to his 601XL right there on a sunny morning, right on my little grass strip here in Florida. It was a whirlwind tour, but if you take a look at it, it's all about people. And if you want to know what my reward for all these years of work is I like engines a lot, but I really, really like people more. So if you go through this and look at it as a little bit of a travel log, I share this because, all the people that I know out there, they start off as builders and just people we saw at air shows, and gradually over time, a lot of them became real good friends of mine, and we've had some real good times out there. And if you are sitting at home watching this and you're thinking your local EA chapter or some of the stuff you do doesn't have enough of an element of fun, I used to feel that way too. And then I got out there and went around and met a lot of people and worked with a lot of people and treated people fairly. And over a long period of time, made a real good collection of friends in aviation. And if you're of the same mindset, come on out. Get to know us Corvair guys. I think you'll find us to be a real friendly group. I really mean it when I say if you're an old school home builder and you like machines and you like people and everything, we got a good collection of people for you to meet. That's it for now. Thanks for coming along on the trip. William Wynn, signing off.